When does a game wholly absorb you? Do you notice when it happens, or does it pass without reflection? I recall that single moment clearly in Dying Light, when it transcended a gaming experience and became a personal experience. We'll explore this, and much more. Zombies, zombies, zombies. Are you sick of zombies? Pop culture has hard rinsed the genre in the last decade, but the brain-biting delirium was in full swing circa 2010, thanks to the popularity of the Left 4 Dead franchise, movies like Zombieland, and the series that perpetually dribbled from everyone's crimson lips like liquid fever, The Walking Dead. Offices worldwide became an episodic rumour mill as hallway conversation turned to squeaky clown shoes, double taps, and Daryl. Don't worry if you don't get those references, you're still cool in my Necronomicon. A dinky studio called Techland began development of a game called Dead Island back in 2006. It released 5 years later during the height of the flesh-feeding frenzy. Dead Island was blessed with perfect timing to cash in on the frothing consumer hordes, as well as the zombie phenomena. But the next level of success still eluded Techland. Dead Island faced middling reviews from games journalists which range from good to mediocre, despite having an Australian character with a credible accent. Shocking, I know. However, the response was positive enough that Techland saw a future franchise, a sliver of delicious liver to be torn off the cold biopsy table. Techland left their publisher, Deep Silver, after Dead Island's release. They wanted the creative freedom to develop a product all their own. Techland struck a publishing deal with Warner Brothers, who threw money and full creative rights their way. Techland were free to make whatever they liked, with no oversight, no overbearing direction. They recognised the opportunity to break into the lucrative AAA market and stamp their bloodied brand on the industry. Dead Island served as the robust base, but now they could add whatever toppings they liked. And add they did. Dying Light was a similar creature to Dead Island, but the fundamental game loop was refined. The result was a zombie game which felt fresh and harrowing to a genre in the early stages of rigor mortis. Dying Light's zombies swarmed careless players. The new parkour system was spectacular and fluid, allowing almost unfettered traversal through dense environments. Nighttime turned mundane activities into a deadly cat-and-mouse theatre of thrills. Dying Light was more than a reanimation of the theme, it was a resurrection. Dying Light got people excited about zombies in 2015, and that was no small feat. Techland focused on building a serious story to drape the skin of their game over. They pulled all stops to invest the player in the world. They even hired a professional writer to make doubly sure that players were picking up what they were putting down. This was all part of the gambit to break the AAA ceiling into the big time. A major redesign of the parkour system threatened delays. Techland were forced to the drawing board for many aspects of story and gameplay, and the team faced an uphill battle to tighten the game for launch. Their hard work paid off. Dying Light was the top-selling game in US retail in January 2015, and it became the top-selling new IP for the horror genre. By August 2015, mere months later, Dying Light surpassed 5 million units sold across all platforms, a huge accomplishment for a AA developer. Metacritic user score for PC sit at 8.0, while critic reviews are slightly less glowing at 75, likely due to bugs and performance issues at launch. Dying Light Enhanced and Platinum editions add more content and game modes. Average player counts in 2021 are strong, approximately 6,500 concurrent players for the Enhanced edition on Steam alone. There's no doubt that the hype for Dying Light 2 has renewed interest in this game, but it's impossible to dismiss the positive reception that Dying Light received on release, and people still play because they enjoy the game. What made Dying Light so appealing during the glut of zombie media? Why do gamers speak fondly of it? Is it still worth your time in 2021? What follows is my unabashedly biased analysis of Dying Light. We'll tear off layers of gameplay to reach the beating heart of this intriguing title, and we'll gorge ourselves in the intestinal findings. This video is more than a pseudo-analytical review. It's a commentary on the bias which affects our experiences. I have a personal connection to Dying Light's parkour system, and I offer a different and somewhat coloured perspective. Grab that machete, install that king upgrade, and limber those muscles. We've got lots of bloodied ground to cover, and the people need their antizin. It's not always important to understand the context of a game's development, but it's often insightful. In Dying Light's case, it reveals how they arrived at a successful formula, while also shedding light on subtle yet important influences. Even the smallest decisions can shape an experience in profound ways. Techland had a lot to prove with Dying Light. This must have excited and terrified the team. Here was the perfect opportunity to build the beginnings of a AAA resume. Techland were already armed and well equipped for the impending apocalypse. Jula Arend, an architect turned level designer with real buildings in her portfolio, turned her talents to constructing a location which felt authentic. Jula helped the design team build the fictional city of Haran, which the game takes place in, using a fictional history as the base. Jula had an eye for the way people settled the land before it was a bustling city, which informed how Haran grew from the dust and sweat. It's a subtle touch which plays with the flow and feel of Haran. The result is organic and lived-in spaces rather than harsh gamified zones. Jula contributed to the design of the indoor areas. Dying Light draws inspiration from the Brazilian favelas of Rosina, the austere architecture of Istanbul, and the tight verticality of Techland's home city, Wrocław. Haran is familiar yet unique. A place that tickles the memory with delightful recognition yet still inspires wonder. Haran is cited as a Middle Eastern city, and there are visual and cultural distinctions which reinforce this. But the team have merged many cultures to effectively create a new space, a fictional space. Some comments mistakenly set the game in Turkey or Brazil, but these locations were cited as architectural and cultural influences only. Pre-alpha footage painted a different picture of Haran. Brecken, an NPC in the final release, was the original protagonist. Jade and other non-player characters were American, not a credible cast for a Middle Eastern setting. Techland's natural movement system was a key factor in the look and feel of Haran. Techland wanted a parkour playground. They needed structures which encouraged free movement. The natural movement system began as a mess of hooks, spots that the player could climb or vault. Hooks were highly specific, and devs had to fill the map with them. The placement of a single hook was a deeply considered decision, as it had the potential to affect quests and gameplay. Level designers were frequently moving hooks to accommodate quests and the main plot. It was a laborious task, and the team decided that it wasn't working. Their programmers came up with a new natural movement system. It scanned the environment in real time to determine what the player could interact with and climb. This was a drastic change which opened a huge can of worms. Players could reach areas that the developers hadn't considered. They could do things that hadn't been considered. This single update broke many of the quests, and the team realized that they had to return to the drawing board. Techland were also worried that their local team of writers couldn't capture the imagination of the Western audience. Dan Jolly, a DC comic writer, joined Techland as a consultant to help rewrite the story. All of the side quests were redesigned for the improved natural movement system, and enemy AI was tweaked to handle, and take advantage of, the dynamic freedom which players now had. A large reason for Dying Light's success is the change to the natural movement system. All of the enemy AI, diverse side quests, exploration, and the main story owe their success to this single moment in time, a coder's curiosity to empower the parkour and allow it to inform the environment, instead of the other way around. Not all of the team sought answers from modern influence. Paweł Błaszczak, composer and audio director, wasn't interested in grinding rock anthems or jumpy club music for the soundtrack. He looked instead to an era dominated by synth-heavy dread and drawn-out terror, the 70s and 80s. Techland wanted that feel of isolation and despair pumped into players' veins. The contrast against modern tracks sets Dying Light apart from the pack, and it makes meaty use of each instrument to squeeze the atmosphere toward heady asphyxiation. Dying Light refused to take the long dirt nap in the years since its release. It has 4 expansions: Cuisine and Cargo, the Bozak Horde, the following, Hell Raid, numerous cosmetic bundles, both paid and free, and a host of free updates including an asymmetric multiplayer mode called Be the Zombie, where players invade the game of other players as a zombie. The Astronaut Bundle, the latest content released, was on the 18th of August 2021, just a cheeky few months ago. Techland has kept its undead creation alive with a steady buzz of content. We'll focus on the base game and the expansion The Following, as these are the meat of the Dying Light experience. Players have accused Techland of reaching for the wallet a little too often with micro-content, and the waters are muddied with bundles so numerous that they border on Ubisoft levels of absurdity. Still not as egregious as bigger studios, but it's a habit Techland should drop. None of this dulls my enthusiasm to be running again in the city of Haran. I played Dying Light at release, and it's great to be back. In some ways, I never left. The opening hours are deceptive. The first cutscene introduces the protagonist, Kyle Crane. Kyle is tasked with retrieving stolen data. He's then airdropped into a city boiling over with bodies and death. Once you're in control, you're sent on a series of introductory missions which are anything but simple. You'll struggle to survive the opening hours, but this is by design. Dying Light isn't content to tell or show that Haran is hostile. You must feel it, smell it, taste it in the acrid air. The beginning is packed with frenzied combat, slow, agonizing climbs, terse pauses to plan routes, heart-in-mouth chases, and clutch moments where you're staring death in its decayed maw. Zombies are highly aggressive, tenacious, and flood the streets in shambling, staggering waves. Dying Light throws a kitchen sink of promise at you, but this is no Hollywood movie. This isn't the best bits condensed into a doped-up, hormone-busting highlight reel. Haran is warning you, equipping you for what will come. Are you ready? The beginning is a carefully crafted pressure test. Kyle is a new survivor, and those kicks haven't scratched off the baby layer of rubber yet. In Haran, it's the deliberate or the dead, and you must be graceful under that pressure. The noose loosens, just a little, once the training wheels snap off and you're released into Haran. It's as if this necropolis senses a newcomer, and sets its denizens loose for a hazing. Your first free steps are tentative, with the savage tutorials and crushing crowds fresh on your mind. It's okay, it's still waiting for you, but without virals constantly dogging you like rabid wolves. They're around, but for now there's less of them. It's clear as you move through Haran that Kyle is no parkour athlete, no traceur. Get used to the word traceur. It's French for parkour dude, and I use it from here on. Kyle's climbing is laboured, drops hurt, and his stamina is laughable. Movement is awkward because Kyle is awkward. The closest thing to parkour he's done is track and field in high school. Kyle is fluffing the truth. He's a trained GRE agent, so it's implied that he's athletic. His affinity for parkour also implies something else. We'll get to that soon. Haran is a city of levels. Verticality plays a key role in movement, and it's impressive that Techland opened the environment so much. What a thrill it is to scale a building while the growling horde seethes below, dead arms snatching at your legs. Once you crest a building, the thrill continues across flimsy wood and corrugated iron rooftops. A quick pause to survey the surroundings, and then you're off, tracing the delicate thread through the eye of the needle. Time spent probing Dying Light's possibility uncover its main hook: experimentation. The results can have unexpected and delightful consequences. A leap to a distant rooftop might end with you slamming chest first into its rusted edge, scrabbling painfully and frantically upward to the tune of enlivened groans below. Perhaps you misjudged the distance and land with a sickening crunch among the slack-jawed throng. Delightful examples? Perhaps not. But each failure offers the opportunity to learn. Dying Light's parkour is different from other parkour systems. There's just the right level of forgiveness in the natural movement system. You're encouraged to experiment with Dying Light's parkour, not only because it's a core component, but because liberation is found in the simple joy of it. You'll pull some cool moves if you're bold enough, and even the timid will find their footing before long. Ledges and rails are the perfect example. Balancing along them could be frustrating, but there's a little stickiness to stop you falling off, which is subtle but artfully implemented. When you're off balance, the view tilts and the arms extend out. This is a visual warning to the player, and it heightens the sense of dangerous verticality. The skewed view toys with the vestibular system and puts you directly in Kyle's street-scuffed kicks. You're on that ledge with him, and you'll appreciate the adage, "Don't look down." This is especially true at extreme heights where structures tilt and the wind howls and you struggle to stay upright. Kyle has a weight to him which feels right. His animation and head movement enhance immersion in ways few games manage. There's a short delay to sprinting as Kyle builds momentum. Climbing has a faltering quality as Kyle transfers weight between handholds. The drop roll ability has a brief, satisfying moment of disorientation as Kyle lands. When Kyle is grabbed by a zombie, the viewpoint is chaotically knocked around with each blow. Kyle's viewpoint is used to full effect to impart the physicality of his situation, and it's easy to know what's happening in-game based on visual cues alone. Nuanced body movement is an often overlooked component of the immersive sim. Developers beeline for the technical sim aspect while subjectively ignoring the physical, immersive aspect. You're engaged when wrestling with these systems, but are you immersed? Do you feel as though you're in the boots of the protagonist? Kyle's animation does the heavy lifting to draw you into this world. You become the focus of the moment instead of the audience. The first-person perspective is the storytelling lens, even during cutscenes, which maintains a constant sense of self, from start to finish. Dying Light has clever visual cues to guide you through Haran. Black and yellow striped structures advertise climbing routes. The structures integrate smoothly with the background aesthetic, and though you recognize what they are, you appreciate how they melt into the theme of the area. Traversing a tower could be an exercise of frustration, but colored handholds guide you in the right direction. Colored lighting and other subtle cues lead players through the denser, more ambiguous areas. It's an old trick using visual cues to guide the player through an area, but it takes a clever mind to integrate this design without hurting immersion. You appreciate it more when you consider how hard some traversals might have been without it. Parkour skill expands as you gain experience and unlock new abilities. The traversal of Haran changes over the course of the game from clumsy necessity to stylistic art form. The joy of Dying Light's parkour is the flirtatious flow state, the moments when vaulting, climbing and timing are in harmony and running is effortless. New abilities refine this feeling like a distilled drug, but flow is as much a mastery of self as game systems. There's immense satisfaction in timing a vault just right so that you cruise over a wall, drop into a roll, vault over a pack of zombies, and climb out of harm's way in a seamless stitchwork of style. The flow state is a puzzle that insulates the parkour and keeps it hot from hour 1 to hour 50. You earn experience for each handhold, vault, and botched jump. Parkour is an opportunistic point salad, further fueling the runner's high. The simple goal of sprinting across town is the chance to be creative. How much cool shit can I do between here and there? It's not something you're always aware of. It tickles the subconscious ivories with a maddening familiar melody. Climbing is an effective way to reach point B. It's also an effective way to level parkour skills. The XP system runs contrary to the spirit of parkour, but it works brilliantly at hooking players into the systems. A tower ascent becomes a winner's climb as XP tumbles into your parkour XP bar. Once you unlock the ability to roll, every drop presents the opportunity to scrape a little more experience and a little less skin. This passive reward system is incredibly clever in presenting you the music, to dance the parkour dance, to fully engage with the environment and see it as traceurs do. It's parkour vision for the layman, a gamified analog for reinforcing neural pathways to become a better traceur. The grappling hook, an unlockable skill item, opens the world further and irrevocably alters the traversal game. Its physics-defying point-to-point movement shatters the parkour pseudo-realism. The grappling hook is balanced to unlock as you enter Old Town, an area characterized by narrow streets and sheer verticality. It's an optional unlock, but it feels mandatory. You can rely on parkour, but the convenience of the grappling hook makes it impossible to ignore. Long climbs and precision jumps got you down? Are your landings more like fallings? Are the laws of physics getting in the way of a good time? We hear you, survivor! For just a handful of hard-earned XP, you too can have grappling hook TM. That sounds critical, and on some levels it is, but I couldn't imagine the experience without it. The grappling hook fractures the immersion of the parkour, but it also elevates movement and flow to whole new levels. Its versatility begs experimentation. With it, you're more prepared for clutch situations like being surrounded by zombies, bypassing dangerous areas, and staggering enemies. You'll pull moves that cause physicists to go apoplectic. Movement speed increases with the grappling hook, allowing you to zip distances quicker than you can run. There's plenty to do in Haran, and small conveniences add up. An empty map confronts you the first time you open it, but locations of interest, quest markers, safe houses, and random encounters pop in as you explore. People need stuff, and you're the stuff guy. It feels overwhelming as icons blister the map like boils on a biter. Completing story missions vomits exclamation icons across the map. At times, the map resembles a Tom Clancy's Far Cry title, though markers aren't as ubiquitous. There's always something to do, always a reason to visit far-flung locations and push the fog of discovery back a little further. Many tasks have multiple steps that pinball you around the map and extend task length. I was fine with this to begin with, but it grew tedious after a while. The emotional gravity of side quests cover the range of human emotions from serious, heartfelt and heartbreaking to silly, stupid and hilarious. Techland didn't want an experience so bleak that players lost the will to live, but the tone of some of these quests is in glaring contrast to the serious narrative of the plot. Take this guy who's obsessed with payback after his friends drew a dick on his face while he was passed out drunk.
But Felix and Heinrich are gone. They're my best friends. They left me behind. When I looked in the mirror, you know what I saw? They drew a thing on my face. You know, a man thing. I was so mad. I still am, pretty much. So, I'm going to get back at them. But first, I must figure out how. It's hard to believe, but it's all true.
Or request for a mayoral seal so that a pencil neck can stamp official documents.
I'm looking for information about a large supply cache hidden somewhere in the city.
Ah, you mean the bunker? Well, if you wish to take possession of it, you'll have to lodge a 201 needs of agency form, JP 401 details of operation form, also a 606 compulsion of special authority form, and a 302B declaration of emergency functions form. That last one has a 3-day turnaround in the best of circumstances, which these are certainly not.
I need it now.
Well, then I suggest you employ the traditional method of accelerating the government process.
Which is what?
Bribery, of course. I need the official seal of the mayor embossing stamp. The mayor was last seen at the hotel. Find his room, and you should find the seal.
This is pointless busy work. Even a zombie apocalypse can't stop bureaucracy. Not ridiculous enough? How about curing someone of lycanthropy?
Forget about the zombies. There is something far more terrible. A living nightmare that walks among us.
Just calm down and tell me what's going on.
I am Babar Kizel, and I am the victim of a most terrible and ancient curse. I am a lycanthrope.
A what?
A lycanthrope. A werewolf. You've seen the undead all around you. Is it so unlikely that other such monsters are here as well? The Nosferatu, the mummy, the lycanthrope. Dahlia the witch says I can be cured if I ingest a potion of garlic, wolf's bane, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Help me collect these things and get me to another safe zone. I will pay you very, very well.
Moments like these are contrasted with the gut-wrenching task of killing Rupert's zombie wife, rescuing a child after his father turned, and stumbling across survivors who took their lives instead of succumbing to the persistent nibble of starvation. Goofy dialogue and quests demand too much of the theme and story. Dying Light devolves into Dead Island during these moments. The balance along that precariously thin line is clumsy. The tonal slips end in eye-watering, crotch-aching moments of ridiculous storytelling. Not all of the brevity is bad though. Tolga and Fatin, a pair of socially inept engineers, appear early in the game and are a delight to visit and run errands for. They plan to escape quarantine and they enlist your brawn to complement their over-complimented brains. Their disdain for Carl's brutish demeanour is evident, and they make hilarious jabs at his IQ. Tolga and Fatin are absurd company, but their humour works because their plight is grounded in the bigger problem, and you're never sure if they know what they're doing or fudging their way through it. The culmination of their effort? A submarine which goes 20 metres before exploding. The outcome is a fitting contrast to their inflated egos. A group of kids huddle in Old Town, looked after by a surrogate custodian, Rupert. Rupert roleplays a wizard to take their mind off the uncertainty of missing loved ones. One of the children complains about the growling troll which keeps them awake at night. Brave knight Kyle Crane agrees to slay the troll, which turns out to be a demolisher in a nearby car park. These examples demonstrate that Techland's writers understand nuanced brevity. It makes the goofier quests all the more baffling. Traceurs, or runners as they're coined in-game, are the mailmen of the apocalypse. Everyone left stuff behind in the mad scramble to reach safety. Journals, toys, sentimental items, boredom alleviation devices, you name it, someone is missing it. Survival also brings more pressing concerns. People need medication, food and water. For each request of teddies and crayons, there are 2 or 3 for resources or weapons. Most tasks meet the needs you might expect during an outbreak, which lends believability to the situation and an empathy towards survivors. Mailmen deliver more than things. They deliver surprise, joy, and hope to a people drifting from civilized humanity. Parkour has a philosophy: to exist and to be useful. This translates neatly to the runners of Haran and their status as humanitarian couriers. To exist, as a rough interpretation from French, means to be able to continue. A safe approach to training makes a healthier traceur. To be useful is a literal translation. Parkour founder David Bell was a fireman for a time, and he believed that traceurs had a responsibility to be useful and involved in their communities. The Haran runners are no different, risking their life to fulfill the needs of the many, though this is less a luxury of choice and more a necessity of survival. Some areas or buildings are sealed in black and orange containment tarp. The visual influence from the movie Contagion is strongest in these locations. If you find them, congratulations! You discovered a pocket of parkour goodness. These quarantine zones are my favourite areas. They combine light puzzle solving, combat, and creativity to fulfill specific objectives. Infected people were sealed inside these areas and allowed to turn, and the contained space teems with the undead. The atmosphere behind the medical tarp is thick and palpable. Danger is a constant tickle on the neck. Moody tracks and curated jump scares nudge you to the seat's edge and maintain a refined edge of hostility. Quarantine zones are a vertical slice of the game, a tasting platter of experience to satisfy even the most discerning brain-eater palate. I wanted more of them, and I wanted them to be bigger, bolder, to push the limits of the runner and their knack for survival. I also wanted them to say more about the virus and the struggles of the people. Self-containment is simultaneously the greatest and most detrimental aspect of quarantine zones. They are bite-sized experiences, wholly avoidable if you choose, which is why I suspect little narrative effort was put into them. Quarantine zones are narrative fruit ripe for the picking. They could have told unique stories and deepened the lore of the outbreak. Instead, they exist in stasis, their isolation a justification as throwaway content, which they are anything but. Challenges are the parkour and combat testing ground for efficiency. Challenges grant XP and rewards, but they are, for the most part, just another thing to do. I completed a handful, grew bored, and ignored the rest. The parkour challenges in particular require an intimate knowledge of areas and routes, and I bounced off these hard, eschewing the tedious restarts for natural exploration. The GRE airdrop care packages into Haran during the first half of the game, and you contract the billowing red smoke to the booty. Care packages can be turned in at a quartermaster for a chunk of survivor XP. Crates are hotly contested and force Rias and the tower into conflict. The drops maintain the GRE's facade on the world stage while their agent hunts the stolen file. Safe houses are your base of operation. They offer a breather from the action, a change of threads, an item stash, a mission board, and you can advance time and escape the horrors of the night. Safe houses are typically unsafe when you find them. Clearing them out unlocks the UV-drenched haven. Some houses tell a story about former occupants, and they hint at the work required to make the house safe again. This usually involves restoring power and blocking windows or doors, but it's satisfying to create green space on the map. Exploration is another core tenet of Dying Light. The world is so open and so full of possibility. It's a classic sandbox, and the puppy dog excitement of a world bursting with stuff to see and do feels rare in 2021. This is my second foray into Haran, and my excitement hasn't diminished in 6 years. Dying Light doesn't lean hard into cartography iconography, but there's still plenty to do. Haran is an organic city, not a trait you see so much as feel. The way that the squat, simple buildings of the slums butt against opulent high-rise towers, the tight streets littered with overflowing bins and garbage, the plentiful cafes and stores with rotting food and cups still cluttering the outdoor tables, the power stations hovering just beyond the outskirts or tucked away from tourist hotspots. It feels right, as though the city sprouted from a fledgling seed and spread out. Municipal buildings, government structures, public spaces, parks, community plazas, it's all here and works hard to sell the idea of a real location. It's easy to imagine a couple talking, enjoying their coffee and sharing a pastry at the local cafe, when gurgling screams filled the air and the first biters lurched down the cobbled street. Indoor areas are coffins. Open windows and doors offer easy access for both you and the zombies, and a careless survivor can accidentally fill the exits with curious biters. Some indoor areas were designed with traversal in mind, but others only offer one way in. Interior exploration is risk versus reward. You might have cleared the way for now, but time doesn't stop while you pick that lock, and the interminable growls grow closer. You might find brief respite in an abandoned house, but the pressure to keep moving is always there. Some indoor areas are separated by a loading screen, and these are a different bag. On multiple occasions, the environment was too tight for the action, which stifled the parkour and made navigation a pain in the ass. The school is a good example. I got hung up on tables and chairs, and the combat was thoroughly unenjoyable. More space or less clutter would solve the problem without compromising the tension that these spaces convey. None of this would matter if you couldn't loot good stuff. Dying Light's crafting system is similar to Dead Island. Grenades, Molotov cocktails, and medkits are MacGyvered from the scrap in the environment. You'll find weapons and be able to improve them with junk like string, saw blades, and old batteries. This creates a satisfying triforce of exploration, looting, and crafting. High-tier loot is found in dangerous areas, but the rewards are worth seeking. Loot respawns, which lends to the illusion of a huge city. Loot respawns keep play fresh and exciting, and no detour feels wasted. Letters, flags, and trophies await discovery by the keen of eye and bold of heart. Flags and trophies are collectible fluff, but letters are a personal account from Haran's inhabitants, and they plug gaps left by the broader narrative. Their locations aren't marked, and their sonar ping are so close you'll need to pay attention if you want them all. I found a third in my playthrough, which means I walked past an embarrassing number of them. They stick from between doors, they're stuffed under coffee machines, or they're peeking from behind the covers of a makeshift bed. They have narrative weight, but I didn't have the patience to find them all. Other survivors roam Haran seeking resources or refuge. Enemies might be guarding valuable loot, so avoiding conflict is a considered choice. No risk, no reward. Encounters can appear anywhere, anytime, and they're optional. Indulge the inner sadist and watch the carnage as a silent observer if you like. What's strange about these encounters is the lack of penalty for killing friendlies, accidental or otherwise. Kyle never shows concern for the well-being of survivors in the wild, which is inconsistent with his caring character. You can murder every single friendly you meet, and Kyle won't bat a psychopathic eyelid. This is an artificiality of the world, that few of your spontaneous actions have an impact on Kyle, the survivors, or Haran. Biters form the backbone of conflict in Haran. They mill in placid groups waiting for a foolish runner to happen by. They're slow and dim but tenacious, and their attacks hurt. Zombies come in different flavors, which ensures that your comfort zone is constantly tested. Virals, infected who have recently turned, retain the strength of their former life and will chase you up buildings and across rooftops. They mutter and cower during brief flashes of fading humanity. Virals are the watchdogs of Haran, forcing desperate battles and panicked mistakes. Other infected appear as you level. Lumbering bruisers, goose-spitting toads, explosive bombers, and the ultimate brute, the demolisher. These variants escalate conflict in moment-to-moment play and offer fresh obstacles to overcome. The rarest variant, the Screamer, is my most and least favourite enemy. From a mechanical perspective, it's weak and relies on its scream to incapacitate. But the Screamer's origin is soul-shakingly and utterly wrong. Screamers are children who have turned, and their bloody visage is traumatizing. Screamers are usually found alone, but in one quest you'll find one in a room with a biter, hinting at what befell the child. Of all the poignant moments in Dying Light, this one hit particularly hard. As the sun dips below the horizon, the game changes. Night is a dangerous time to be outside. The world swims in murky watercolor, which makes navigation risky. But that's the least of your problems. The shuffling horde, no longer placated by the sun, grow more active. They move faster, hit harder, chase longer. But even they aren't the biggest threat. Prowling the nighttime city are volatiles, a highly mutated and dangerous breed of zombie. Volatiles are sentient, fast, strong, and horribly tenacious. They outclass Kyle in almost every aspect, and wits alone decide an encounter with these creatures. If Haran is a chessboard at night, then Kyle is a lone king, desperately moving to avoid a loaded game board. Common sense begs to avoid the night, to sleep through and awake with the morning birds. But that means missing out on opportunity. XP earned at night is doubled. There's a bonus simply for surviving the night. The reward represents the jump in difficulty, but it's always a tempting choice. This is another clever way that the XP system baits you to try new things. Increased XP means quicker progression, which means more skills, which further improves survival. And let's not forget the thrill of the chase. Once a volatile spots you, it's on, and you better be quick off the mark. A sudden burst of adrenaline and then you're scrambling up buildings and across rooftops. Your fearful pants are drowned by the roar and thump of pursuit. More volatiles can be drawn to the noise, and giving them the slip gets exponentially harder. Kyle's terror is infectious, his frantic breath an urgent warning to put hard distance between him and danger. It's easy to be swept up in the moment, palms sweating over mouse and keyboard as the voracious volatiles bear down on you. Pursuits are stressful, but they're also the most thrilling chase you'll experience. The adventurous mind challenges sensibility during each night phase. It's a risk-reward system with no objective measure of value, and you'll often make the decisions on pure emotion, which I think is fantastic. Parkour and wits aren't the only tools at your disposal. The environment is filled with nail boards, hammers, bless the builder, baseball bats, and machetes for your dismembering, skull-crushing pleasure. Attacks are visceral and fights begin and end with a flail of the arms. Techland hired a Krav Maga trainer during Dying Light's development. Krav Maga is a defensive fighting system developed for the Israeli Defense Forces. Krav has a reputation. It's energetic and brutal. Techland spent a few hours in the car park, hitting stuff and paying close attention to the feedback juddering up their arms. Smacking biters is bloody frenzied business, a refraction of that brief car park lesson. Attacks are clumsy and inefficient to begin. Weapons deform and become useless within a handful of fights. Early combat is defined not by how quickly you kill, but how quickly you break weapons. Weapon durability is a good thing, as it exposes the broad range of death at your disposal. Single-handed weapons are fast, fluid, good for nimble hit-and-retreat tactics. Two-handed weapons are ponderous, but they pay back in damage. Weapons are defined further. Bladed weapons are great for hacking off limbs or heads, if you get the angle right. Blunt weapons are cripplers and skull crushers. Throwing weapons like knives and stars are always useful. They have weight too, able to stagger zombies or knock them around. Environments encourage creativity when dispatching enemies. Throw a firecracker to draw attention, then cleanse the area with a Molotov cocktail. Or topple zombies with a ground slam from a two-handed weapon. Or lure biters into an area, then shove, kick, or throw them into spikes. Get creative with your brand of death. It's encouraged, and traps, spikes, and other surprises accommodate your imagination. Zombies level with you, but they hit the level cap before you do. The combat skill tree makes you a better killing machine. You'll eventually be able to dispatch groups of zombies with a single swing. It's satisfying to reach the upper skill levels where you're no longer surviving but have become a single-man wrecking crew. The hordes are still dangerous, but you're better equipped, even without a weapon. Finishing moves, vaulting over zombies, charge attacks, stomping prone enemies, each unlocked ability makes leaving safety a little less risky. You'll develop a combat style. The dropkick grew on me. The physics system is fun to play with. I love knocking zombies down and finishing them with a crushing stomp. I found that an efficient way to earn XP was by herding zombies into groups and immolating the lot. The camouflage ability let me walk through groups of zombies, snapping necks with impunity until not a single biter was upright. At times, this skill felt broken, severing the tension which comes with staring danger in its decrepit face. The camouflage ability lasts 45 seconds. The length is doubled once you hit Survivor rank 25. I like the ability, but it should wear off after a handful of kills. Melee combat is the preferred fighting method, and it serves a narrative purpose. Loud noise attracts zombies. Combat is close and personal and hammers home the physicality of a fight. Guns exist, but they're played down due to shots attracting viral swarms. Few people carry guns. Using them summons bigger problems. An unwelcome surprise then that Dying Light forces guns onto you roughly 2/3 of the way through. Riot's men, as a show of force, often carry guns and have little restraint. This is where the flesh of Dying Light sloughs off the bone a little. Shots hurt and put you at a distinct disadvantage unless you're packing too. Gunplay is less impactful than melee, and the game isn't optimized for shootouts. There's no lean key which guarantees that you'll eat a bullet when returning fire, and guns sound weak and impotent. They cheapen combat by making parkour abilities and positioning obsolete. Zombies are always a threat, so engaging Riot's men with guns often means more work for you. I can't understand why they went down this path. There was a narrative reason to leave guns behind, and gameplay was better for it. If Techland was set on including guns, they could have made them rare finds with dire consequences when used, or made them limited use weapons for clinch situations. Mad Max by Avalanche Studios used this design to good effect, and having a get-out-of-jail-free shotgun for the rough moments was a powerful privilege. Techland did include a silenced pistol, but it's underpowered and does questionable damage against anything. Guns feel like a concession to traditional FPS sensibilities, but they don't work well enough to feel as though they belong. Having said that, I prefer fighting gun thugs to melee thugs. Melee fights grow tiresome as enemies block most attacks, even batting away thrown objects with infuriating clarity. Their block animation is sometimes delayed, and you may think a throwing style lands to have them swatted away a second or two later. Melee on melee is a frustrating mash of buttons until someone goes down. You can parry, but I found it much easier to gun them down or lob molotovs until they were roasted meat. The melee system needed refinement. There's no way to know if your swing will hit, it's a roll of the dice and the odds are against you. Telegraphed openings would have solved the weapon waggle issue. Thankfully, busting zombies is always satisfying. Haran is a beautiful mess. Streets and buildings are filled with the familiar and the foul. Scenes of interrupted life fill every corner. Neatly untidy apartments, stocked shelves, tipped chairs, half-eaten food rotting on the table, half-eaten people spilled on the floor. Some places look as though the inhabitants stepped away, just for a moment, to buy milk or refuel the car. Other places hold the reason why no one returned. It's a ghost town, with the fuzzy chatter of radios and tired sigh of the wind the only real survivors. jeeps, army equipment, and biohazard orange light areas of failed containment. This is an unmistakable apocalypse, bearing the eerie scars of a troubled world. Bodies rot and shimmer in the hot streets. Bloodied struggle marks the doors and walls in grim red. A half-finished tower, which should be crawling with high-vis vests and hard hats, stands silent, plastic garments flapping in the breeze. But signs of resistance fortify the soul. Traps and lights, spikes and flames, electricity and UV lighting, all meticulously placed and set. Haran is under siege by its former residents, but the resistance is stubborn. The indelible spark of humanity burns still, and true to its nature, it will not give up. There's something about an apocalypse that strikes a morbid interest. It's not so much the grim stories, though they have their own allure. It's more a fascination with what happens next. It's a storytelling hook that writers have used for centuries. Then what happened? It's hard to imagine, in a world of lattes, airplanes, and peak-hour traffic, that it could all suddenly stop. That a brief flash of chaos could silence the bleat of horns, the rabble of voices, the clop of feet. Perhaps that's less true in 2021 than in 2015, but even the most empty streets of the 2020 pandemic were enough to strike a primal fear at the prospect of the permanent absence of people. The Haran survivors feel this pressing oppression, that slow, steady crawl of death through the streets. People huddle in clusters, cling to the fading heat of humanity next to them. Their stars die as the dying stars ignite through the constellation of streets. Survivors are coy about determination, that gritty quality which has served mankind well throughout evolution. It takes wind upon their hopes and prayers and deserts this place. A bite, a scratch, a moment of carelessness renders people liars and mutes. They understand the death sentence, and no one wants to admit to an open wound, even one not caused by a biter. Biter. I love that term. Simple and descriptive slang. It appears to be a term coined by the survivors, but its implication comes from experience. Survivors have lived through shit. They've seen bad things. The sorts of things no person should ever have to see. There's a defiant quality to the term, a fuck you to the virus. Yeah, people have seen some horrid stuff, but they're still alive. The term biter is New World vernacular, the sort of thing a runner would say. Runners are the hope and soul of a dead city. However, their heroic dedication boils down to staying busy. Runners have jobs, important jobs, jobs that cost lives if they're not done. Survivors watch the sun rise and set to the tune of the moaning masses with little meaningful work to fill the gap. But runners are out there. It's naive to believe that runners are only out there for the job. The thrill of danger and the parkour high are potent motivation. Haran's rough beauty reveals itself above the skyline, a vista of loose urban planning butting against the wilderness. There's an unkempt homeliness to the sprawl of buildings, familiar in pattern, alien in location. A place you think you know, yet can't quite place. Haran was on the cusp of the athletic games before the virus hit. Posters, billboards, and advertising paraphernalia litter Haran, a stark reminder of the former vibrance of the city. A simple detail, but it adds gravity to the setting, makes it feel like a real place. The athletic games explain the many cultures present in Haran. Countries and accents from around the globe are represented. Haran feels like a place primed for a big event. This seemingly insignificant detail lends narrative credence to the abundant hammers, baseball bats, and hatchets? Okay, credence to a point, but it's the small touches. The rambling, rambunctious slums swap for stately streets mid-game as you're introduced to a new map, Old Town. The leap from poverty to opulence defines the inequity of the people in that single moment as Kyle steps into Old Town for the first time. The untidiness is unnatural here, more a neglected council duty than a natural byproduct of overpopulation. Streets are narrow, buildings are tall. Verticality heightens the claustrophobic feel of the packed streets. Old Town, as the namesake implies, is the oldest part of Haran, built upon the natural wealth of the area and upon the backs of its people. That isn't speculation, they tell you so if you listen. Dying Light makes passing comments about oil running the economy, but this is used to sell the location, rather than act as an open condemnation. Its inclusion wasn't necessary. If Haran were divorced from this idea, it wouldn't impact the credibility of the world or the direction of the plot one iota. Rias's oppression is an insidious growth which is found everywhere. People fear his reach, and the thugs under his sigil attack indiscriminately. Survivors are brutally beaten, an act you'll stumble across frequently. Thugs present less of a roadblock to runners like Kyle who can defend himself, but Rias's cruel injustice permeates everything, dictates a survivor's decisions, and adds complexity to the survival equation. At least during daytime you can see threats like Rias's thugs clearly. As night settles, a renewed fear invigorates the runners. Warnings are issued, and people scramble for safety, for soon the hunt begins. That final beep of Kyle's watch and a shift in the soundtrack accuse that you crossed a threshold. That uncertain survival has now become unlikely. You're no longer the hunter. Visibility is the lonely cone of your flashlight, darting across shadowed edges and drifting silhouettes. The dead speed up, but the living slow down. Even confident runners know that night is a time of caution, that it demands more precision. The game of cat and mouse is afoot. Your tools prove their worth under the shimmer of the stars. Flares are moments of reprieve, remote traps are distractions, and conducting an orchestra of zombies becomes a fine art. The synth-laden soundtrack plucks tension throughout. They went old school on this one, eschewing the despondent piano keys and strings which define newer horror themes. The music evokes a sense of isolation, the drawn-out notes a sigh of enduring loneliness. It's a unique sound for 2015, and it works well as a theme for a city trapped in stasis. Like the abandoned Ukrainian city of Pripyat, the people may be gone, but the environment tells its own story of place and time. Dying Light's soundtrack is bleak, employing a fatalistic tone which implies that there is no hope, that a city overrun by the undead is ruled by it. The music often runs dry to let the world linger in its own sounds for a while. The psychological effect is haunting, isolating, that odd social phenomena of being surrounded by bodies yet feeling very much alone. The horror theme is felt strongly in the opening hours when Kyle is most vulnerable. Dying Light borrows from extensive zombie media, and much of their influence is identifiable. Some details like zombies reflex biting after death are a great attention to detail. George Romero, the grandfather of the zombie flick, has a mural tribute under a bridge, a respectful nod to the modern zombie's origins and its endearing ability to thrill us. The abundant gore gradually numbs the horror, becomes something to take for granted. You'll think nothing of lopping off biter arms, legs, or, more satisfyingly, heads. Horror is effective because of the vulnerability of the human condition. Kyle begins hopelessly outclassed, but earns his stripes over time. Zombies are a different class of creature, not human, which makes relating to them harder. There are moments which link a zombie to its former life, but rarely is the overwhelming sadness of dead loved ones explored as an extension of horror. Zombies become prey, an inevitable side effect of an action-oriented game. How then to maintain that sense of vulnerability and displacement? One word: escalation. Escalation keeps you on your tippy toes, for a time. It's a mechanical trick with a limited lifespan. The atmosphere and corpses do their best to keep you engaged, but the power fantasy strips away the horror. The horror is still there in brief glimpses, but it's buried under the mountain of weapons, abilities, and apathy. Suicide is a salient reminder of the horror theme. Do you pass a corpse hanging from the ceiling and dwell on the overbearing hopelessness one must have felt to reach this point? The signs of desperation and hopelessness are everywhere. Groups of people stuck on a roof without food, people stuck inside, people cut off from civilization. Some didn't want to end with teeth tugging out their insides. Who could blame them? Kyle comments on some of these situations with a sympathetic but never knew 'em kind of detachment. Most of the emotional lifting outside the plot is left to you. Dying Light has 4-player co-op, which becomes available after you complete the tutorial missions. I didn't play co-op for this run, and I believe that Dying Light would both benefit and suffer from a party of players. If you enjoy palpable tension and a feeling of isolation which comes with the genre, single player is the way to go. The beginning in particular is filled with moments where you'll find yourself in trouble quickly and often. Co-op is for people who love to explore or want a tactical experience. Dying Light systems are well suited to a small party of runners, and it'll take a while before party abilities overlap, which gives everyone in the party a meaningful role. Dying Light has some issues, even though it released 6 years ago and received a steady trickle of content. Minor issues in my experience, but still surprising given the release of the enhanced and definitive editions, which must have gone through an extra rinse cycle. Must have gone through. What you're seeing are the quirky things I found during my playtime. Nothing game-breaking, mostly weird textures, and almost not worth talking about if it weren't for the multiple iterations the game has undergone. But we've jabbered about gameplay long enough. Time for something a little different. I get it, you're saying. Dying Light has parkour, why does it need its own section? At the beginning of the video, I said that I knew precisely what hooked me into Dying Light. It wasn't combat, it wasn't Kyle, it wasn't the parkour in its entirety. That one moment. Did you see it? Did you feel what I felt? You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? That roll, more than just a mechanical thing. A pouring of the world from the visible conscious, a moment of disorientation that's gone in a flash and lasts forever. The way that the body moves with intuitive knowledge of its constituent parts. Arms plant forward, then pass underneath the body as legs tuck into a tight ball and pass over the head. The gritty friction burn of hot cement on palms and the bite of dirt particles, imperceptible to the eye, but present under a knowing, calloused touch. This is how a parkour roll feels when you do it. This is the moment that Dying Light had me. This might sound like a lot of intimate information about a parkour move. Blondie did his research. I did. For over 6 years. Not just the 3-hour session on a Sunday afternoon every other month when I could be bothered. I trained parkour daily for years. A couple of hours each day after work, 3 to 5 hours every Saturday and Sunday. I trained in groups, I trained alone, rain or shine, night or day. I was a traceur. It wasn't just the physicality which enthralled me. The discipline, the psychology, the mastery, deep aspects which went far beyond physical possibility. Parkour to me was an awakening, liberation from an old and fearful way of living, a way that saw only walls and barriers and things which say, you can't. Parkour teaches you not that the answer is yes, but that you should stop to ponder the question. It presents your fears, then gently but firmly asks you to look, to really see them. Parkour presents a simple truth. You can lie to others, but you can never lie to yourself. Sure, you can boast about that big jump, but when someone calls your bluff and you're up on that ledge, your mind will fail you, and the body always follows. None of this is to boast. I mention my time with parkour to lend context to my gaming experience. The role in Dying Light is as close to the real thing as I've felt in a video game, almost precisely accurate. It's a neurological system away from the real thing, and even some of that feeling is transferred into the flash of disorientation. Techland wanted practical and realistic movement, and they couldn't have chosen a better ambassador than the father of modern parkour, David Bell. David's expansive knowledge is backed by a handful of traceurs and traceuses, male and female parkour athletes, who captured footage of their movements with a GoPro body mount. My love for Dying Light's parkour extends beyond the humble roll. All of the movements depicted in the game capture the weight and tactile feedback of the discipline well. It's in the simple head motions, it's in the transfer of weight from one side of the body to the other. It feels authentic in a way many gamified parkour systems fail to capture. The sense of vertigo in Dying Light works hard too. I've never played a game which captures dizzying heights so well. People are confident at ground level, but a little height does interesting things to the mind. A meter off the ground can seem like a 5-story building, and latent fears emerge from between the cracks of bravado. Climbing a radio tower or the infamy bridge captures that sense of height in the tilt and sway of Kyle's view. The way his arms adjust balance on tight beams that tip to one side with each step as he struggles with core muscles. These are touches that add pleasing texture to the experience. You feel the wind on your skin, you feel it tugging at your clothes on your swaying perch far above the city. Brecken, leader of the tower, is introduced as a parkour instructor. His humble profession of parkour instructor pre-pandemic is a struggle that many passionate parkour athletes will relate to. Being a professional parkour athlete is hard grift. You battle public perceptions, council regulations, the law, and the waning interest of a distracted class. It's a constant PR campaign on top of maintaining the skill and conditioning of a professional athlete. Parkour athletes are often portrayed by media as reckless attention seekers. Those athletes do exist, as is true for any sport or discipline. In parkour, though, they rarely last, either sidelined by injuries or by flagging interest. Competency requires countless hundreds of hours of repetition. I've performed drops that the casual bystander has called dangerous. What the overweight mid-40s armchair critic never saw was the hundreds of practice drops that honed technique and conditioned bone and muscle. There are no shortcuts. Hours in blazing 40 degrees Celsius weather performing jumps until the water bottle ran dry numerous times over. People see a highlight reel and think they understand parkour. They see less than a fraction of a percent of what it takes to build a strong and competent athlete, one who endures for many years. This is a nice segue into Kyle Crane's parkour skill. It's implied that he picks up the movements quickly because he's a natural athlete. There is some truth to this, but not in the magnitude of his burgeoning ability. If it takes countless hours to build competent skill under the best conditions, then Kyle should be well behind the curve when the credits roll. Instead, he's bounding across rooftops, scaling buildings, and lazy vaulting like a pro. The mechanical implication is that he's a quick learner, one of the gifted ones. The unwritten narrative implication, however, is that Kyle has done parkour before, up to at least a competent level. Kyle's struggle with the movement early game is reminiscent of athletes who have returned to the discipline after an extended break. Skills are rusty, the muscle synergy is off. The knowledge is there, but it needs practice to strengthen the neural pathways. If we can assume that this sub-narrative is true, then it's strange that drop rolls are buried so far in the skill tree. The roll is a fundamental parkour skill, the first one I learned when I began training. And for good reason. It absorbs the impact of drops and is the first line of defense in preserving the body. It's also a safety move, a catch-all when you fail to catch anything and are about to hit the ground. Making this move an automatic reaction is the first goal for new athletes. It's a highly personal move because it's defined by body shape, physical ability, and level of competency, and it is constantly undergoing refinement. Kyle should already know how to roll, or it should be a low-level unlock. Parkour athletes are also a thoughtful lot. They talk about anything and everything, including, but not limited to, health, shoes, nutrition, training, shoes, skill, technique, psychology, open versus closed foot training, style, shoes, philosophy, training areas, shoes, video games, shoes, movies, shoes, religion, and lastly, the zombie apocalypse. All of this banter is absent in Dying Light, homogenizing the Tresseur psyche. Rahim has a half-hearted try during Kyle's training, but it's not real parkour conversation. The horror of the zombie apocalypse couldn't dampen the irony of the countless hours discussing how the group would survive a zombie outbreak, which would then delve into musings on training in casual and work clothes, until someone inevitably declared they'd do it barefoot. The missing vernacular is compounded by the fact that you never see another runner outside. Runners are apparently doing all sorts of stuff, but they're never out there, organically doing their thing. It robs the world of the special personality which parkour athletes bring. There is a joy in the flow of movement where time stands still and you live between breaths, wholly absorbed in the moment. It's an experience unlike any other, and something I'm still incapable of adequately putting into words. Runners would be out there, chasing the flow as much as the food and medicine. It's the holy grail for the parkour athlete. Parkour is a universal language. You don't have to be familiar with its intricacies to understand the broad strokes. We naturally learn to parkour as children, and we don't realize we're doing it. We unlearn it as adults, with sedentary lifestyles, time-poor schedules, and grown-up stuff. We forget how to play, how to have fun, and how both these activities nurture a creative mind. As someone who analyzes games, as a pseudo-reviewer, I feel that it's my responsibility to disclose my bias. You should know where my opinions come from. I expected to overlook Dying Light's flaws for the robust parkour system. Instead, I grew more critical. Even an initial positive bias can lead to a negative opinion. This was partially true in my case. I did expect more from Dying Light's parkour, but only because it presented strong systems. Ultimately though, I enjoyed Dying Light far more because of my experience as a tresseur. Some like to pretend that bias doesn't exist, that it shouldn't exist, that we can have an emotional experience inside an emotional bubble, and judge it beyond the context of emotional response. Perhaps, in some cases we can. The point of art, the point of storytelling, the point of games, is to make us feel something. Video games in particular are predicated wholly on a satisfying and worthwhile experience, one that plays heavily on emotional resonation and feedback. If you're not convinced, ask yourself why some game systems feel satisfying to engage with. Tug on that thread and see how it unravels. How is anyone expected to unemotionally engage in an emotional activity and still experience anything? Once we identify the types of games we like and the types we don't, it's beneficial to ask why. Was a system too artificial? Do you have real-world experience with the theme? Is there a parallel to something in your life? Was the story uncomfortably close or too far away? Bias informs everything, subconscious or otherwise. Understanding and acknowledging our taste in games allows us to make more informed decisions about what, how, and why we play. You cannot tear emotion from a gaming experience, and nor should you. I state my bias clearly so that you know where I stand, and you can measure yourself accordingly. Perhaps you'll agree. Perhaps you won't. It's okay, either way. The point is not agreement or disagreement, but understanding. Wow, this section got heavy. I could end with tongue-in-cheek discussion about shoes, but I doubt many tresseurs are watching. Let's dig into the juicy stuff. The story. Teklen's approach to serious storytelling is worth a look. Something isn't right. My grievance with the plot didn't fall into place until I began writing this section. In broad strokes, the story is okay, if predictable. The problem lies in the characters. Before we go further, let's acknowledge a couple of things. The motion capture in Dying Light is really good. Cutscenes relay emotion incredibly well, and interactions erupt into life with listless pacing and expressive gestures. When someone argues, you feel the emotion burning underneath. Which brings me to the next point. Dialogue is generally sharp, well written, and well voice acted. Dialogue has the restrained precision of a professional hand, something I noticed particularly with Alfie, the guy who wants UV bulbs from Infamy Bridge. No fluff, no wasted motion. The way good writing should be. This quality extends to the main characters for the most part. Let's examine them. Kyle Crane, GRE puppet and all-around good guy. Kyle is the cookie-cutter hero, a bland blend of altruism and righteousness. He's the knight in shining armor. There's a reason this trope is rarely done in its pure form anymore. It's boring. There are no struggles with morality, no misdirection or battles of conscience, no growth. Kyle is a flat character, but the tone of the plot demands more from its protagonist. This is meant to be a serious story, but Kyle has nowhere to grow. He has a long way to fall, but this isn't explored either. Early in the game, Kyle is forced to work for Rias in order to do some less than savoury tasks, such as extorting protection money. Even while threatening people with violence and hiding his true identity, Kyle can't help but moralise. This hypocritical dialogue hurts Kyle's credibility as a heroic character. It feels as though the writers wanted to inject moral flexibility but were afraid to push too far. The result is a goody two-shoes who lectures people to step up their game while masking his own intentions. Kyle had great opportunity for growth. Had he been an uncaring mercenary for hire with dubious morality, the struggles of the tower could have opened his eyes to the consequences of blind action. The catalyst could have been a survivor who looked like his younger brother or mother or a fellow soldier fallen in battle. It didn't need to be big, just enough to tip Kyle toward the correct corridor and let him fumble down it. People love an underdog. They love stories of redemption because it shows us that the world isn't always a bleak place of cold stares. It shows us that wrongdoing can be redeemed, that no horrible path need be followed to its end. Sometimes people do care, just enough, and it makes a difference. I liked Kyle, but not as much as I should have. His moralizing put him beyond my reach, and his lines were overacted, which made scenes more dramatic than they needed to be. I don't believe this is the fault of Kyle's voice talent, Roger Craig Smith. This was an issue of tone, which wasn't accurately conveyed to Roger. Lines are otherwise well spoken, but some of Kyle's dialogue makes me cringe. Minutiae like this further erode believability, which is a shame for all of the effort that Roger puts in. Dialogue for lesser characters is generally tight and well written, and this level of attention should have been spent on Kyle's lines to give them the same impact. Kyle's relationship with Rahim is the most authentic and relatable aspect of his personality, and I wish they had explored this further. Rahim is a likable kid, and Kyle sees a young brother in need of a role model. Kyle's gentle but firm guidance is on point, but you know that Rahim is going to make mistakes anyway. Rahim is Jade's younger brother, an impulsive and exuberant young buck eager to prove himself. His cocky, distrustful attitude belies a kind heart and good intentions. If he can demonstrate his worth along the way, all the better. Rahim laments that Brecken and Jade don't treat him as an equal. He comes across as an eagle with its wings clipped, and this drives him to brash acts. Like any kid with a cause, he'll go out there and do, whether they say yes or not. That's how you get noticed. That's how they'll take you seriously. Rahim trains Kyle in Parkour early on, a charity that grounds their relationship. Kyle is a novice runner, but he's been around, knows some things. Rahim, like the others, slowly warms to Kyle, and opens up about his frustration at being treated like a kid. He senses in Kyle a figure which he doesn't have in his life, someone who might take him seriously and possibly understand him. Even this isn't enough to rein Rahim's thirst for recognition, but it's ample to endear his character. Jade is a tough, capable survivor who Kyle meets in the opening cutscene. The posters of her face plastered around Haran back her reputation as a badass. She was a kickboxer due to compete in the athletic games before the virus screwed everything. It's a solid backstory which cements her stake in Haran. It's her home, and it's personal. Jade is practical, weighing the needs of the many over the needs of the few, which others view as cold. Jade is solemn, reflective, and rarely light-hearted. She has seen too much, and she projects her sobriety onto Rahim, which he hates. She does it out of love, but Rahim interprets it as churlish, and it's no surprise that he rebels. Of all the runners, Jade looks the most like a Tressus. Her thin-soled shoes speak to a high aptitude for parkour, even if they're less practical for stomping brains. No one with soles that thin gets away with sloppy landings. We're meant to empathise with Jade, but she's the running partner who takes the month off. You partner with her on one occasion, which doesn't last nearly long enough to build rapport. She's in important cutscenes and she talks to Kyle over his radio, but there isn't much there when she isn't actively involved. This feeling is amplified by the open world. Side quests will lure you away for hours, which slowly but surely degrades the bond that the plot tries to establish. This is the other edge of the blade for the open world game. Players may ignore the plot for a long time. It also affects player urgency. Kyle is bitten and needs regular doses of a drug called antizin to avoid turning into a zombie, but the condition conveniently stalls while you frolic around. In order for us to care enough about Jade, she needed more time with Kyle. Brecken leads the survivors in the tower. He didn't ask for the position, but it fell to him all the same. He is a humanitarian who tries to help everyone, not unlike Kyle. Early game footage of Dying Light revealed Brecken as the protagonist, but he was dropped along with the original plot. Dropped, but not let go. Brecken serves as a narrative explanation for the existence of runners in Haran. And that's about it. He has no impact on the plot, has little screen time, and his character never develops. Remove Brecken from the plot, and it wouldn't make the slightest difference. I don't hate Brecken, but he's given far more emphasis during conversation and cutscenes than I think he deserves. Lena is the qualified doctor of the tower, tending to the sick and wounded. She takes her work seriously, and like all health professionals, she never stops. She has more agency than Brecken, though her role in the plot amounts to pleas for medicine. Lena is a minor character whose inclusion makes sense in the subtext of the tower's existence. Without her, it's likely that the tower survivors would have turned some time ago. Runners can be replaced, but losing a qualified doctor would be a death sentence. Karim is who Kyle should have been. The two never lock horns, but they do cross paths. Karim was a bodyguard for Provincial Governor Errol Asani, and his history is an intriguing read. Errol Asani was bit on the leg by a biter. He swore that they could leave Haran and get medicine before he turned. Karim, not knowing how long rescue would take and growing concerned over his employer's leg, had it amputated against Errol's will to prevent the spread of infection. Errol fired Karim on the spot. Karim wandered Haran a while before deciding to join Rias. Karim is a principled man who took his job seriously, going so far as to protect Errol from himself. Though Karim joined Rias, he's in it for his own motives, and compliance is merely a ruse. Karim helps Kyle, giving up vital supplies so that Kyle can take them for the tower. After the fight in Rias's pit, Karim returns Kyle's gear to the tower survivors. Karim is an interesting character, and I would have preferred that the story used him as the protagonist. His shifting allegiance and murky background paint him as a man on a personal journey, a man in need of a cause, a man looking not just for answers, but for himself. This is not someone who sits by while things happen. He is the one who makes things happen. This trait alone would make him a more engaging protagonist. Kadir Suleiman, aka Rias, is the chief antagonist. And, oh boy, we'll have a field day with this one. Where Kyle is the knight in shining armor, Rias is the moustache-twirling villain. He is portrayed as a man so evil that he would kick puppies and steal lollipops off children. On several occasions, he fractures the fourth wall, taunting the player with promises of the awful things he'll do. It's all ham and cheese without the damn pizza base, let alone the toppings. Rias is designed to be so despicable that there's zero doubt about his intentions. It's so unnecessarily heavy-handed. The backstory is equally flimsy. Rias requested that the GRE airlift his paraplegic younger brother Hassan out of Haran. The Ministry of Defense refused the request, and Hassan was killed in the outbreak. Rias, enraged at Hassan's death, turned on the GRE, stole their files, and became the cold-blooded killer he is now. Except some of the survivors hinted his cruel streak well before the outbreak. Rias is a comically bad villain for a serious story, a cookie-cutter punching bag for Kyle to jab at. He's a villain that belongs in a James Bond or Indiana Jones movie. For Rias to be credible in a serious story, he needs nuance. He needs to exist beyond the black and white morality of old stereotypes. It's frustrating when he shows moments of this, a sentence here or there which has substance and is genuinely thought-provoking. but the message is destroyed by the overbearing personality. Even when Rias says something with a ring of truth, it's easily dismissed as irate jousting. Rias is the biggest disappointment in the Dying Light narrative. We've seen the power of memorable antagonists like Vas in Far Cry 3 or Alma in Fear. They can overshadow a nameless protagonist and carry the plot. Rias lacks any trait we could emotionally latch onto. He's cruel, uncharismatic and spiteful, and there's nothing which endears him to the player, not even his brother's death. The opening cinematic establishes the scope of the epidemic. Kyle parachutes into Haran, which is a sea of spot fires, black smoke, and the steady murmur of the infected. Kyle is given a high-level brief before leaving the plane. His employers, the Global Relief Effort, want to recover important research about the virus. They believe it was stolen by former employee Kadir Suleiman, who now threatens to publicize their research if anything happens to him. Radio comms are jammed, and survivors in the quarantine zone have no avenue to the outside world. Kyle is the lone lucky duck with a radio which reaches beyond the jamming. Alarm bells are ringing, Willie. Let's recap. A guy threatened to leak stolen files, comms jamming which prevents survivors from calling for help, a rampant virus, a secret which the GRE doesn't want made public under the thin pretense that awful things could happen if it got out. As if awful things aren't happening already. Kyle's naivete is revealed early, and it already has his character on the back foot trying to win me over. He doesn't question events or motives. While there isn't much detective work to challenge him, it's clear he isn't stupid. I make this point to strengthen the idea that perhaps Kyle should have been a roughneck. An uncaring marionette is more plausible than a do-gooder being led by the nose. Even a moment's pause at the ramp as Kyle processes information would have been enough. Kyle's landing ain't so hot, and he injures his leg, gets jacked by Rias' thugs, then bitten by a zombie. Watch that first step. Pause for a second. Virals are the zombies who run really fast. A viral is the zombie which bites Kyle. Throughout the game, virals never bite when they attack, and this is also noted in the fandom wiki. Kyle's bite is bullshit. This isn't the only time characters are bitten or threaten to be bitten by virals. Unpause. Two strangers save Kyle from becoming street chow. One of them sacrifices himself so that Kyle and the woman, Jade, can escape. The man is Amir, and his willingness to die for a stranger makes no sense. It's explained near the end, don't worry. The opening cutscene is filled with a lot of stuff. Kyle's mission brief, confirmation that there are survivors and not all of them are friendly. Loud noises attract biters. Kyle just arrived, but he's already one of them, inextricably tied to their grim destiny. Kyle's bite leashes him to Haran. It's a badge of sorts, something to identify him as a survivor and to escalate the stakes. A cynical person might already doubt whether the GRE would drag an infected agent out of Haran, even if he had the files. Kyle awakens inside a place called the Tower, where survivors have gathered to pool resources, protection, and support. Kyle needs regular doses of antizin, a drug which keeps the virus in check and stops people from turning for a while. It's implied that antizin is rare, which doesn't alarm Kyle as much as it probably should. This is proof that the GRE didn't arm Kyle with enough information. He had no idea that getting bit would cause him to turn, and he's clueless about what happens next. A convenient oversight by the GRE. Right, Kyle? Rahim is waiting on the rooftop where you're introduced to Parkour. This slight tutorial introduces the movement system and it builds rapport with Rahim. He's cocky and distrustful, but he's already warming to Kyle. Rahim notes Kyle's affinity for parkour, calling him a prodigy. The opening missions introduce the player to the major game systems and to buy Kyle a spot at the table. He's an outsider, untrusted, unproven. The bite is an unexpected ticket to entry, but there's something about Kyle which the tower can sense. He isn't desperate, he has too much optimism and swagger, he hasn't lost anything. When the GRE learn of Zera's research for a cure, they task Kyle with an additional objective: secure Zera's research. Not to assist, aid, or collaborate, to secure. How the fuck is this not an alarm loud enough to rupture eardrums? Moving on. Kyle meets the first test of character when Brecken returns from a mission, beaten and empty-handed. Brecken is too injured to chase the next antizin drop. Kyle volunteers to go instead, recognizing the opportunity for brownie points. Kyle almost blows his cover during a discussion with Lena, where he exposes his intimate knowledge of Haran's pharmaceutical stocks. Kyle recovers the antizin drop, but instead of returning it to the tower like the knightly stud that he is, he burns it under the direction of the GRE. Their excuse for this humanitarian crime? To force a meeting with Rias. This is more transparent than Victoria's secret lace, and Kyle's compliance is, dare I say, out of character. He doesn't have it in him to condemn the suffering survivors in the way that he does. He understands how desperate the situation is and knows that returning without antizin dooms countless lives. Kyle could have recovered enough vials to reduce the need from life-threatening to concerning. Or he could have stashed the vials or offered another way of meeting Rias. It's not like Rias hides his location, an apartment complex called The Garrison. A warlord feared is a warlord in control, and Rias has little to fear from anyone. Least of all a wannabe with lofty ideals and a penchant for the dramatic. A discussion with Rias is inevitable, and a handful of vials would buy enough time to organize a meeting without killing anyone. Burning the antizin is the cold compliance of a paid mercenary. This is the man that Kyle Crane should have been before a redemption arc changed his moral trajectory. It would have added crushing emotional weight to the end of the following expansion. But we get ahead of ourselves. The tower is gripped by desperation when Kyle returns. A gun is pointed at their forehead. The GRE played their card well, and he stands ready to offer himself once more. The Tower Collective agree to send Kyle as a representative and appeal to Rias for antizin. Clean slate and all. I have mixed thoughts on this decision. On one hand, perhaps they figure they have nothing to lose by sending an outsider into the lion's den. If he dies, one less body to strain antizin supplies. On the other, it's a critical last-ditch effort for survival which they entrust to an outsider who's barely a day old and they know little about. There's no backup plan, which makes this decision more baffling. The mission is either important or Kyle is expendable. The situation sends mixed signals. Why pin your hopes on a nobody who has little skin in the game and probably won't make it out alive? They dress the decision as Kyle owing Amir his life, but it's a hell of a gamble. The meeting with Rias confirms every rumour in one cruel cutscene. The barbarous act is timed to make sure that the player recognises that Rias is the chief antagonist. This theme of cruelty persists in every interaction with Rias, and it's ceaseless. The unending tirade of pointless psychopathy is draining, as if we need the point constantly hammered into our skulls. I do get it. Sometimes a villain is just a villain, but he doesn't have to kick the puppy all the way through the plot. What would have been disarming was meeting a sympathetic and compassionate Rias, someone who defied rumours and expectation and made us question what we believed we knew. A Crane who was sympathetic to Rias is an interesting Crane indeed. The reveal of Rias's underlying psychopathy could have been a slow burn, as he had Kyle perform increasingly horrible tasks. What if Tahir was introduced as Rias, and he maintained the charade for much of the story? Toss a few breadcrumbs to hint at the real identity of Kadir Suleiman and let players sleuth it out. Rias's hotel room in Old Town suddenly has more significance, but kept as a non-mandatory location to reward players for seeking the truth. Tahir is a war dog like Rias, pure in that respect, and his intimidating size and complete lack of empathy make him a worthy antagonist. Only once Tahir is defeated does the real Rias step forward, revealing that Tahir was a decoy for agents like Kyle to chase. If only. Rias is indifferent to Kyle and dismisses his bargaining attempt. Kyle is sent to restore comms to a radio tower and collect extortion money from survivors. During Kyle's extortion attempts, he deviates from character again. He follows Rias's direction to the letter, threatening and coercing survivors into giving up payment while lamenting that he hates himself. The player is given no choice to foot the bill for these outposts, a charity more in line with Kyle's personality and, honestly, which would have been quicker based on the size of the satchels they hand over. This is another example of how Kyle would have been better as a hard-ass mercenary. By contrast, he then clears threats around these outposts to make them safer for the residents. It's weird. Do a good thing to justify fucking them over, while the clock is ticking. Guilt isn't a believable reason to be doing this busy work when Kyle doesn't hesitate to do these shitty deeds. Mercenary Crane would force payment and leave. For all that work, Rias gives Kyle 5 bottles of antizin instead of the 2 crates promised. Are you surprised by this? Kyle is, maintaining the solid wall of naivete he established early. Rias again promises 2 crates if Kyle fulfills the final condition. Bring Jade to fight in his pit. Rias taunts Kyle with this ultimatum, musing on whether he will be the dog who helps the tower or a man who saves the maiden. This line teases a decision that neither Kyle nor the player get to make. Kyle finally accepts that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5, and arrives at a long overdue conclusion. The GRE are a corrupt, manipulative organisation protecting their own interests. Kyle returns to the tower with the pitiful antizin supply. Kyle meets Rahim on the rooftop, and I enjoyed this cutscene which displays another moment of heartfelt bonding between the two. Rahim refers to Kyle as a partner in crime, a guy who understands the vision and will share in the glory. Kyle's reluctance at being big brother is disarming because he never pushes Rahim away. He likes the kid, and the kid is starting to like him. Rahim openly talks about his problems and insecurities, which makes him more accessible than his sister. Kyle and Jade spend a mission together, searching a school which Rias is guarding. I say together, but their screen time is brief. Very brief. They're looking for antizin, but find explosives, enough to level a high-rise. This sets the plot for later and is an attempt at getting Kyle to build rapport with Jade. It's the only time Jade and Kyle do a mission together, and it's thoroughly sterilized. This could have been an opportunity to reveal the true Scorpion, a glimpse at the woman under the armor. Kyle learns little about Jade during the school mission, not nearly enough to nurture the bond. She doesn't open up and doesn't tell us anything we haven't already learned. Empathy is built upon a bedrock of understanding, vulnerability, or personal experience. If a character is stoic or without flaw, what could anyone possibly offer them? Vulnerability is a strength of its own, but Jade's wounds are raw, the spine, too proud. She throws away the opportunity to connect with Kyle and the best chance for the player to care. After returning a tissue sample for Zere, Kyle receives a call from Rahim. The kid has taken the explosives recovered by Kyle and Jade and tries to destroy the volatile nest with his friend, Omar. They botch the job, and Rahim is now in trouble. Omar is dead, and Rahim is holed up inside a boxcar, bleeding from a wound. Kyle wants to inspect Rahim's wound, but the explosives are primed and will detonate in 5 minutes. With little choice, Kyle leaves Rahim in the boxcar while he plants the explosives and destroys the nest. It's a thrilling mission. Parkour in, around, and through a construction site packed with zombies as fate ticks away. Kyle is exuberant as he leaves the construction site. Rahim will be pumped that his plan worked. This sequence was done well. Kyle instinctively knows, deep down, that Rahim is bit. You as the player feel it too. Kyle's forced hand is all the more heartbreaking. His false bravado masks a fatal certainty. When Kyle returns to the boxcar, Rahim has turned, and Kyle is forced to kill him. Kyle's anguish at Rahim's death could be seen as empathy for Jade's renewed suffering, and that's part of it. But Rahim has endeared himself to Kyle, and Kyle's anguish for Rahim is born of a true connection. This is the first serious gut check for Kyle. He could have reported Rahim's plans to someone in the tower and asked them to keep an eye on the kid, but Kyle keeps the secret, as close brothers do. It's just between us, kid. Rahim's death is a keen edge. Their secret means that Kyle feels responsible. He enabled the kid, to some degree. But Kyle also shoulders far too much of the responsibility. Rahim is impulsive, and no one had control over him. Rahim was always going to do brash things to be recognized as an adult. Jade doesn't see it that way though, and runs off after overhearing Kyle explain to Brecken what happened. This is a pivotal moment for Jade and Kyle, a point of raw emotional conflict which could have been used to deepen their connection. Instead, Jade exits stage right and isn't seen again for a while. Kyle's next reality check comes when he's forced to fight in Rias's pit.
You come to us like a snake in the grass. Here, in a city of lies. You are the biggest liar of them all.
An interesting line. Rias knows what Kyle is, who he works for. But that's as much depth as the conversation offers. Rias bluntly spells out the intended theme of the story later in the fight.
Is this your first feeble attempt at controlling your own destiny, Crane? Too little, too late, I fear.
Rias is disappointed that Kyle hasn't figured it out yet. Can't say I blame the crazy bastard. The flashing neon writing was on the wall when they ordered Kyle to destroy the Antizin. Kyle gets a measure of retribution by separating Rias from his gun. We even get a Shatner-inspired moment. It's great popcorn cinema, and this is where the narrative shines brightest, when it embraces these elements of the writing. A story which can't decide what it wants to be inherently becomes the easiest common denominator. Not the lowest common denominator. The action flick is still an enjoyable night on the couch. Dying Light as an action game works great, both mechanically and cinematically. Rias uses Kyle's radio to order his associate, Bassam, to publish the GRE file. Stop. I have questions. If Kyle's radio bypasses the jamming, why doesn't he try to reach people on the outside once he realizes that the GRE aren't on the level? And how the hell does Rias get the file to Bassam in the first place? If he has a channel to his contact, why wait until now to make a move? If the file was passed over before the comms blackout, why wait to expose the GRE? And why not organize immediate extraction from the quarantine zone? So many whys! In a later radio communication between Kyle and Jade, Jade says,
Crane, stay away from me. I hear your voice and all I can see is my brother.
She sees Rahim's brash personality in Kyle, a personality bound to big risks and bigger mistakes. Kyle does whatever it takes to win, an attitude that Rahim was developing. In some ways, Jade is saying that Kyle hasn't grown up, and this is a more insightful subtext of the plot. It goes the distance to explain Kyle's naivete, idealism, and gullibility. He hasn't learned to read between the lines. This line doesn't redeem Kyle's flawed personality, but it does endear him a little more, big kid that he is. The bond between him and Rahim was partially a product of mutual traits. Jade leaves a photo of Amir for Kyle to find. Not again. It's unclear whether she implies that Kyle is responsible for the deaths of the people she cared about, or whether Jade feels guilty for not saving them. Perhaps a little of each. Even if Kyle had enabled Rahim to carry out his plan, Jade knows her brother. Rahim wouldn't wait for opportunities to prove himself, he would go out and make them. It's shallow comfort to realize that Kyle saved Rahim. Had Kyle and Jade not recovered the explosives, Rahim would have gone for them. He might have been tortured to death by Rias's thugs. Or Rias might have realized the value of his prisoner and used Rahim as leverage. Kyle and Jade reunite inside the Old Town Museum. Jade is bit, and both are in dire need of Antizin or they'll turn. Rias tosses down a single injection and forces Kyle to choose who gets the dose. This is another character test which Kyle seemingly fails. He cares about Jade, so the choice should be easy. A brave Kyle would have injected her without hesitation. Instead, Kyle tells her that she should have it, which opens a debate until his condition worsens and the choice is stripped away. While I believe that it was unintentional by the writers, Kyle reveals his fear of death in this moment, hesitating at the threshold of the hungry void long enough to let Jade do what he cannot. Lay down his life and accept defeat, accept death. Which does he fear more, I wonder? A slight deviation from the White Knight formula, dressed as a dramatic pause. Kyle hallucinates while Jade dumps exposition.
For a while I blamed you for Amir's death. I wanted to kill you. But I realized it was time for Amir. It was time for him to go. Everybody's life is finite, Crane. You can't deny it. It's pointless. Amir's life counted. And now he's gone. Rahim's life counted. and now he's gone. If sacrificing my life means saving everyone in Haran, then that's what I want to do. I was born premature. The doctors didn't think I was going to live, but I fought. I struggled and I fought, and I worked and worked and worked. I became a champion. I became the Scorpion. I left my mark on the world.
This is the stuff we should have known earlier, trickled over the raw wounds to heal their rift. Forcing this lump sum of empathy on the player and asking them to care feels artificial. Kyle regains consciousness and realizes that Jade has given him the injection. Then she turns, and he is forced to kill her. A rippling echo of Rahim's fate. Rias' response to this is a scathing indictment of Kyle's character.
All of this, and still you had your choice made for you. Disappointing, Crane.
This is almost aware enough to bust the fourth wall. Rias frames his cruelty towards Kyle as character-building exercises, that Kyle has no agency. Reflecting on recent events, it's easy to think that it's all beyond Kyle's control. There's an implication that Kyle lets others think for him. Rias mocks him for his fear of the burden of decision and his inability to embrace the strength of individual choice. Which is somewhat ironic, as Rias owns little of the chaos he sows, gliding from war crime to war crime with a villainous sneer. There's no ownership or burden in these hateful acts. Nothing survives the wasteland of Rias' mind, and it's honestly amazing that he can hold a rational thought for the deafening emptiness of it. But he isn't entirely wrong about Kyle, is he? Tahir has his loose end tied not long after.
Yes? Then why don't you?
Because you're not the kind of loose end you leave untied.
The situation turned dire as the Ministry of Defense released TV footage faking a rescue of the last remaining survivor of the quarantine zone. Kyle scales another antenna to install a signal booster which reaches through the jamming to broadcast worldwide that people are trapped inside Haran. The incoming jets, seconds from releasing the bombs, veer off. The GRE contact Kyle after the broadcast. They want to broker a deal. The research in exchange for a ride out of Haran. Kyle finally does what his character has promised the entire story. To play the good guy with an open hand and an open heart. Fuck the GRE. Took him long enough, but even a greedy character would be suspicious of the GRE upholding their deal. What's to stop them from seizing the research once Kyle's on board and flinging him out? The GRE's agenda is meant to be secret, but something is wrong before Kyle leaves the plane. Lots of unanswered questions and happy coincidences which Kyle has the luxury of glossing over, but we, as players, don't. The cold delivery of the female operator is the biggest tell.
Data on the subject, Kadir Suleiman, a local political figure hired to maintain order after the outbreak. His brother Hassan died in a disease-related incident before we were able to evacuate him. Suleiman blamed the GRE for Hassan's death. He stole a highly sensitive file which became his bargaining chip against the GRE, with instructions to publicize it if anything happened to him. Data on the subject, the stolen file.
This isn't a voice of compassion or charity. It's a voice of orders and results. A covert voice. Is it really a surprise to learn that the virus was developed as a bioweapon? It takes power and money to move governments. The GRE has pull, and you can bet that if they had all the information they needed about their pet project, Haran would be a smoking ruin. Kyle tracks Dr. Camden to his lab, which is flooded with biters. Camden dumps exposition as Kyle fights through the lab. Unlike Jade's bid for empathy, the new information fills gaps in the story and is more welcome. Camden and Zera were affiliated with the GRE and believed they were working on a cure. Rias was tasked with protecting both scientists before his brother died. Another GRE operative was sent into Haran before Kyle to rescue the scientists, but he failed. That same operative was Amir, the man who sacrificed himself in the opening cutscene to save Kyle. Make no mistake, this is a dusting of the plot's corners so that things make sense. There are no plot twists which put a new spin on the situation or its characters, or which will make you feel differently about events. I appreciate the exposition, even though a lot of this information is scattered about Haran in letters and conversation with survivors. The reveal that Amir was a GRE operative does have some significance in subtext. Jade and Amir were close, and it's plausible that Jade knew that he worked for the GRE. When she rescues Kyle, she makes a point to recover his radio. It could be that she understands the importance of communication in the quarantine zone and didn't want to lose a vital piece of equipment. It's more likely that she recognizes the GRE-issued radio like the one Amir used. This implies that, from the very beginning, she knew that Kyle was a GRE agent. If he could be half the man that Amir was, the tower might have a chance. When Kyle contacts the GRE again, he gets Rias instead.
They call it the keys to the kingdom. Very shortly, a helicopter will come and take me away. Imagine the damage I shall be able to do outside the confines of these walls. Of course, if you think you can stop me.
So much cheese, my god! The GRE offer Rias a chance to get to the chopper in exchange for Zera's research, but the guy still feels the need to hang it on Kyle with a dumb shot at retribution. Small wonder that Kyle feels as though he has weak agency when stuff is handed to him. Rias is a dog without a bone, and it casts a glaring light on his shallow motives. What is the plan beyond escape? Where does a man like Rias belong but quarantine? Where better for a rabid dog to live and die than its own diseased sandbox? The climb to Rias is thrilling and exemplar of the sort of action which makes Dying Light memorable. Parkour, combat, danger and abundance, there's plenty to love. I appreciate these sequences which highlight the game's praiseworthy qualities. If the fight with Rias had been an extension of this sequence, I would have finished the game a happy camper. But it isn't. The final fight with Rias is an anti-climax. Gone is the thrilling parkour and combat systems we've grown accustomed to, replaced with quick-time events. This fight tests patience, not skill, and it's like throwing the handbrake on a bullet train. Kyle's skill and abilities, things we've relied on all game, are thrown off the skyscraper for this meek and monotonous exchange. I swore out loud when I realised what was happening. A disappointing end for a disappointing villain. I suppose there's poetry in that. The GRE chopper arrives while Rias and Kyle struggle. Kyle gets the upper hand, kills Rias, and secures the research. The chopper circles as Kyle contemplates his next move. With Zera's research, Dr. Camden is confident that a cure is around the corner. All the struggle, the parkour, the zombies, the ability unlocks, the crafting, the exploration, all of it amounts to a 2-minute QTE prompt. 20 plus hours of struggle for 2 minutes of triviality. A showdown with Rias was inevitable, but how did it build to this? Is the leveling system to blame for resulting in a player who might be horribly overpowered by the time they reach for destiny? You could never guarantee how strong a player was or which abilities they've unlocked, and so would have to build encounters around the lowest level achievable by endgame. It is impossible to anticipate how strong a player might be when they reach Rias. That shouldn't prevent Techland from crafting a worthy boss battle. The fundamentals still exist: weapons, crafting, and parkour. I would have loved to see an extended sequence of the tower climb where Kyle has to reach Rias to put him down while under attack. Elevation, zombies, and traps would challenge Kyle's skill and knowledge. What if Rias got bit during the chaos and took an experimental cure? Instead of purging the virus, the cure begins to mutate Rias into a stronger, more intelligent variant of Volatile. This is an infinitely more interesting fight and would allow more creativity, such as Volatile Rias summoning virals with a scream. It would also be a great lead into Dying Light's expansion, The Following. The rule of thumb when writing fiction is to tie the loose ends and present a satisfying conclusion by the end. Dying Light partially fills this requirement, becoming a victim of its own scope and ambition. Dr. Camden hints that a cure might be possible with Zera's research, but the tower is no better off. People are dying, and the power vacuum Rias leaves will be filled by another. An explanation for the curt ending may lie in Dying Light's expansion, The Following. We'll get to that, don't worry. The radio message from Rias, which triggers the final fight, is abrupt and caught me by surprise despite having finished the game at release. This is the most telling severance of Dying Light's ideas, and we can only wonder what might have been had there been time. The story could be improved by painting more depth into Kyle and Rias. This would have demanded more depth from the story, which I don't believe is unreasonable. Kyle's altruism is rarely tested, and when it is, he never reacts to the experience and wonders if he could have done better. His profession as a GRE agent is at odds with his naivete, and it's hard to think of him as anything more than a quixotic caricature. Rias is a template villain with an axe to grind and no cause to lend it to. His rare moments of insight reveal a shallow personality. The dangerous villains are the ones who begin to make sense, whose goals are understandable, if not relatable. Rias is not one of these. He proclaims to thrive on chaos, which puts his psychopathy in the ballpark of the Joker. Unlike the Joker, Rias lives inside a narrative bubble. He has no history to speak of and exists solely to jab Kyle with the sharp end of the stick. And this would be fine if Kyle gained any agency from it. We also needed more time with Jade to give her death meaning. It could have become the catalyst for Kyle's transformation to champion of Haran, forcing him to take responsibility for his actions. Instead, her pacing is off and misses the emotional heartache that Techland were aiming for. Dying Light's plot isn't bad, and neither are its characters. Techland wanted a serious story, but their hesitation to fully commit to it and their desire to appeal to Western audiences hurt the writing. Kyle's character is inconsistent, Jade's character is too distant, and Rias is a caricature. Had they tightened the loose writing, they might have hit the resonant frequency they were after. Techland's decision to scrap Brecken as the protagonist may have contributed to Kyle's off-kilter personality. Perhaps there wasn't enough time to smooth the rough edges. Perhaps they tried to stuff too much of Brecken into Kyle. Whatever the reason, the GRE Human Resources Department deserve a slap on the wrist for employing a moralistic agent like Kyle to do their dirty work. Dying Light's theme is grander than personal vendettas, the cost of thoughtless action, or even moral responsibility. The setting and plot ooze themes of control, and this is constantly reinforced. The endless list of tasks, the tower's needs, Rias's whims, the opportunistic GRE. Rias berates Kyle for his lack of personal agency and seeks to liberate him from moral trappings. The strong are in control of the outcome and in control of others. The weak perish. Parkour is the rebellious expression of freedom, and this theme is the rubber band which catches the downswing of the tone and slingshots it in an empowering direction. Kyle is in a constant state of flux between control and freedom. The more oppressive the plot becomes, the more liberating the Parkour feels. But neither extreme is ideal. Rias is control personified, a corrupt martyr of power. Parkour is freedom, but the people would never get their answers in if it's all Kyle did. True control rests in the middle like a balancing traceur, the mastery of self. It's something we as players can take away from the experience, and it's something Kyle appreciates after he finally recovers Zera's research. Dying Light presents loss as a reminder that we don't have nearly as much control as we believe. But that doesn't absolve us of inaction. The best lived lives are not aimless, they are lived with purpose. A secondary theme is the duality of man, how we're capable of selfless sacrifice and selfish slaughter, and how they are different sides of the same dented coin, a flip away from chaos. Nothing like a health crisis to bring out the best in people. Dying Light was ambitious. Development didn't stop after its release. Techland had overextended themselves and realized that it wasn't possible to include everything on the first bite. Concessions were made to get the game out the door. I believe that this is the reason why the final fight with Rias happened suddenly. A deadline forced Techland to yeet their baby out early. Dying Light had plenty of bugs at launch, further proof that time had grown short. But they never stopped working. Ideas which didn't make it into the base game had another shot at life in Dying Light's expansion, The Following. Techland canned the release of a standalone game that they were working on, Hellraid, to pool resources for the following expansion. They gathered the fan feedback pouring in and curated the best ideas into expansion content. The following was released standalone, but it now comes bundled with the Enhanced Edition. It's a chunky offering as DLC goes, which expands the lore of Haran and the virus. This isn't throwaway content that's done in an hour or two. Let's dive in. It's hard to ignore the marketing for the following. Techland's four-wheeled feature is front and center in trailer footage and promotional screenshots. The buggy is a new tool which Techland considered important enough to justify its own skill tree. You can upgrade the buggy with components to increase its range, durability, and utility as a zombie-crushing rocket-propelled roll cage of death. Tires, turbo, traction, engine, suspension, and brakes can be swapped to improve handling and performance. The buggy's skill tree unlocks flamethrowers, a bumper bar, and other gadgets to crush, roast, and roadkill the undead hordes.
Use a bumper! That's what it's for!
And there is a satisfaction to pimping out your ride. A separate skill tree is a bit much though. It makes more sense to include buggy abilities in the crafting system and let player exploration and looting unlock them. The buggy is less a central mechanic and more an enabler. You'll have cool moments with it, don't get me wrong, and cruising around mashing zombies is a thrill, but it's a thing which takes you places. The buggy is justified by the massive open spaces, and you'll feel that pain keenly if you're in the middle of nowhere without it. It's necessary for you to travel, unless you enjoy hoofing it across the map for 20 minutes. Which brings us to the setting. The following is set in the countryside outside Haran's quarantine. Verdant fields are the highway for a new style of gameplay. Buildings on the map are pockets of interest. The sense of discovery is more tangible in the following, as locations dot the map like giblets and are easy to identify. This is in contrast to the crush of the Haran slums or the disorienting verticality of Old Town, where spaces feel similar. You can bring your save from the base game, and this is the recommended way to play. The following escalates combat and difficulty with new systems, and while the experience wasn't harder, the following leans into the crafting system and requires smarter play. The artificiality of enemy levels is noticeable in the following. Some creatures are leveled bullet sponges, a point which becomes obvious when you level past them and can take them out with a shot or two. It's not level gating, and it's clear that some enemies were designed with co-op or a higher player level in mind, but it should be less visible to the player. Techland had to consider players who imported their save and were ranked 25 in some or all skill trees. You can still improve ranks to 25 in the following, but a new skill tree enables players to push beyond that. If a skill tree is fully ranked, the XP converts to Legend XP. Legend skills boost efficiency and damage across a bunch of categories, and each skill can be leveled multiple times. It takes longer to increase Legend rank. Don't expect an obscenely overpowered character unless you sink significant time into the following. The Legend tree rewards focused playstyles. I sank most of my points into bow and crossbow damage, which made a significant difference in combat and let me specialize in ranged attacks. The crossbow is a new ranged weapon which joins the arsenal. Open spaces gives ranged combat a bigger focus in the following. The crossbow won't drastically alter the way you play, but it provides options. Loud noises are still sweet zombie crack, but at least you'll see them coming. Blueprints litter the world, and at this point there are so many that it's white noise. I developed a process for using blueprints. Scroll to the bottom of the list and use the strongest blueprint. Ignore everything else. Less powerful blueprints are surpassed by high performers, and you never look back. This was also a problem in the base game. The blueprint list feels like busyness for the sake of busyness, with little thought given to why. Blueprints should offer unique abilities to stay relevant. I would have been fine with less blueprints which were more relevant and gave meaningful combat options. The loot game is more rewarding in the following. Remote locations offer plenty of plunder, and this fuels the drive to explore, pushing you out to outlying structures and interesting geography. Fuel is mandatory if you want to travel, but it never hampers exploration. The new loot system allows the scavenging of vehicles for components. Searching them becomes second nature after a time. I rarely found myself lost for fuel, and when I did, it wasn't a hard resource to find. I expected the parkour of the following to take a back seat, but there are plenty of opportunities in the countryside. There's less opportunity for flow, but more opportunity to discover. It's not an unfair trade-off, but I'm still disappointed that a fundamental system is diluted. Collectibles and tasks are in abundance, and the following has new tricks. You'll find military caches at checkpoints and outposts, but they can only be opened with a special keycard which Kyle doesn't get until late in the plot. The locked military containers hold special blueprints, but unless you're a completionist, there's little point recovering them. I opened a couple, realised I didn't need them, and didn't bother with the rest. A montage of missing loved ones fill the job board at any given moment. Their last known location is marked, but it requires a hunt to find the body. That's right, none of these souls are alive, but that doesn't stop the quiet buzz of hope you feel for each photo. Perhaps this one will be different. Even up to the final missing person, I believe that someone might be alive. Even Kyle was less surprised to find a body than I was. What have they done to me? Unique mini-bosses protect specific locations. These encounters are designed for co-op, something to be tackled as a group. These encounters don't scale, and the following feels more like a co-op sandbox than a single-player experience at times. Tackle one of these creatures alone and you'll burn resources taking it down. It's satisfying, but it's a blatant reminder of the number engine driving the vehicle, something I don't appreciate in an immersive game. The last big addition are volatile nests. These are like quarantine levels from the base game, except more dangerous. And like the quarantine levels, I thoroughly enjoyed them. You'll feel most vulnerable in these areas filled with high-level zombies. Volatiles form in these nests, and their grotesque mothering is painted across the walls, grows from the human sludge. These areas are horrifying, and burning every last one of them feels like a responsibility. The nests are often buried inside cave systems, which makes reaching them a deliberate and dangerous task. Volatiles roam the nests during the day, and an attack during waking hours is risky. Infiltrate at night, however, and the volatiles are out hunting, leaving virals and biters to guard the nests. The horror sludge feels alive underfoot, which strengthens the repulsive aura of these areas. Walking through them elicits the icky, unclean feeling the Aliens movies achieved so well. There are plenty of side tasks to fuel your countryside antics, and you'll visit every corner of the map to complete them. As with the base game, they grow long in the tooth toward the end, but the stories of struggle and humanity are varied and interesting enough to pull you through. There's a greater isolation to the struggle out here thanks to the scattered settlements, and distance underlines the darker elements of survival, such as mental health. Tragedy and perilous survival will keep you on your toes. The bleak theme is ever present, and the threat is escalated by the titular group. Kyle is an outsider again and must prove himself to earn trust and uncover the mystery. Not much is known about the cultish group who populate this area, and they stare after Kyle as he moves about their settlement, an unproven and unworthy intruder upon their way of life. Even after you've earned their trust, you never truly feel accepted, and you begin to wonder if that is a good thing. These people know things they aren't willing to tell. Each return visit to the settlement feels like a roll of the dice as to whether Kyle will be embraced or hung. It's a similar feeling to Resident Evil 4 as Leon walks through the starting village. The villagers don't stop him, but he's an outsider, and their ambivalence toward him is as sinister as any horror dredged from the abyssal depths. The individual stories of the following are more specific in their detail, graphic in the implied suffering. Children who lure survivors to a warehouse to have them killed by a demolisher. A screamer watching cartoons on TV with its biter parent. Sabit, a villager found in a cave under his cabin, who is being torturously transformed into a volatile and begs to end his suffering. Bad shit is happening here, and it's worse than the city. The following's plot is a string of questions begging answers. The tower finds a dying man who babbles about an enclave outside the city. The survivors there are immune to the virus. Survivors in the tower are dwindling, and Anderson stocks are almost gone. With few prospects, Kyle volunteers to check the claim. So begins the core mystery of the following. Kyle arrives at a settlement outside the Haran walls and is met with suspicion. No one humours his attempts at conversation, and there's a passive hostility at his presence. The most hospitable person is a trader named Khan, and he confirms what Kyle sensed on arrival. The people here ain't right. Khan has been there a while, but he's still considered an outsider. Kyle's dramatic tone is subdued in the following, and he's immediately more relatable for it. The burden of helping the tower has drained him, but Kyle is determined to reach the bottom of this mystery. His frustration at the vague responses from these people mirrored my feelings. This, Kyle, is a big step toward a fully realized character. Kyle learns that making himself useful is the best way to earn trust. Unlike the linear plot of the base game, the following opens after a handful of missions. Kyle is told to help people, then given a slap on the ass and shoved out the door. Completing side quests, destroying volatile nests, unlocking safe houses, and doing other tasks earn Kyle Trust XP, which improve his standing in a shadowy group called the Faceless. The masked, faceless acolytes are ambassadors of a figure whom everyone refers to as the Mother. Her name is spoken in reverent whisper. She is more than a figurehead. She is God on the lips of her people, and all the lambs of this place are under her shepherd. The Faceless approach Kyle once he earns enough trust, and he is invited to a ceremony at a hilltop temple, which the locals call the Eye of the Sun. Khan is among the entranced crowd. His earlier disappearance and reappearance here, with sudden admiration for the Mother, is ominous. Faceless acolytes swing censers which emit a strange blue smoke. The biters on the platform, wreathed in smoke, are docile and make no attempt to feast. The acolytes usher Kyle onto the stage and tell him that he is now blessed by the Mother, and that zombies won't harm him. Kyle passes out, and when he comes to, everyone is gone. Left behind is the deafening echo of more questions. The following's plot is a slow burn. It doesn't do anything clever, but the restraint holds your attention as it sinks its teeth deep. This style of plot would have been a perfect fit for the base game too. The slow reveal of detail in a non-linear world is a dying art these days. We feel that something is off, but we don't know what, how, or why, and this feeling prods the curious explorer. Poking around is taboo, at first, but that's the allure. Attila, the ethnographer, has the unenviable task of unearthing an ancient prophecy for the Mother. Rock paintings and old texts speak of a cataclysmic sickness, a champion of light, a great sacrifice, and a mercy of the light. The Children of the Sun were an old tradition before the outbreak, but the virus has elevated them to become the primary religion of the area. Why the sudden surge? Only when Kyle gets his audience with the Mother is everything explained. The cloaked figure throws her cowl off to reveal a hideous sentient volatile, a revelation which shocks and disgusts Kyle. The Mother, once called Jasmine, was the wife of a man called the Colonel. The people called her Mother even before the outbreak, and she thought it was a sign of respect. Jasmine and the Colonel were bit during the chaotic outbreak. Jasmine's reverent followers took her away to protect her. The Colonel died, but she survived by drinking the serum which he told her would save her life. The serum didn't cure the virus, however. It quickened the mutation. Jasmine turned into a sentient volatile and slaughtered her saviors as the animal in her took control. The blue smoke is the serum in gas form. It slows the mutation, but cannot reverse the immutable result. There never was a cure. The revelation is distressing. Kyle's silver bullet is just a rusted bolt in a sea of tetanus. The moment lingers long enough for Kyle to realize that the tower is doomed, their fate locked with his failure. Kyle still fights it, and we expect nothing less. Kyle is presented a surprise choice. Each option is ambiguous, hinting at what might be involved. I paused for a long while, struggling to fathom each outcome. I chose the option which I believed Kyle should have taken. But what happens if Kyle decides to save his friends? Mother is enraged at Kyle's lack of vision, a stubborn trend in his personality. She force feeds him the serum and then they fight. The mutation takes a hold of Kyle midway through the fight and he continues barehanded with newfound strength. He kills the mother, grabs the remaining serum, and rushes back to Haran. When he emerges from the sewers, a mother and child scream as they spot him. Confused, Kyle looks at his arms and recoils. He's a sentient volatile, like the mother. A suitable ending for a stubborn personality. But this isn't what I chose. The other option is quick and conclusive. The mother takes Kyle to a nuclear warhead and begs that he destroy the virus once and for all. The bomb is the fail-safe, which the army built into their experiment. Kyle understands the only option left on the table, the ultimate test of the White Knight character. He detonates the weapon for the greater good of humanity, killing himself, the mother, and obliterating Haran off the map. This ending is darkly redemptive. The nuclear White Knight saves the day. Both endings reveal the schism in Kyle Crane. On one side is the decision he should have made, a decision of mercy and true sacrifice. The other side is the selfish desire for personal redemption, which we expect he'll make. Neither offer a happy ending, and that's the point. But Kyle finally got his choice, a true chance to shape the outcome. A theme of belief underpins the following. The children of the sun believe in the mother. She is a symbol of hope, prayer, and restoration, and the people blindly follow. They do not waver in message or resolve, and this faith acts as a shield, not only from harm, but also from truth. It's a cautionary message. Faith can bestow strength, but it can also blind one to the truth. Light and dark, opposing themes. This is personified in the mother, her two halves balanced in duration but not in application. The following expansion is a worthy addition to the Dying Light franchise. It sets off in a different direction to the main plot, and I like this freeform approach. I had a preconceived belief about not enjoying this experience, and they were false. The buggy, the map size, and the bountiful loot make exploration a rewarding loop, and the snippets of lore deepen the mystery which permeates everything. The plot had me tugging at the narrative thread, thirsting for more, even when the main beats wouldn't let me near a conclusion until I was there. The parkour is still relevant, even though it doesn't get as much time in the sun. The bevy of tasks and points of interest ensure that you'll squeeze many more hours out of Dying Light, and I'll be damned if that ain't a good thing. Dying Light revived the zombie genre for another bite. Combat, crafting, exploration, and parkour are the heart of the experience, but it's the game's parkour system which I remember most fondly. It stands as one of the most accurate depictions of parkour in a video game to date, and it alone was enough to draw me back to Haran for this analysis. Technically flawed characters portray an otherwise serviceable story. The following expansion shows more heart, but let's not pretend that the story is Dying Light's draw. It's the majesty of flow, the messiness of combat, the mastery of movement, the brutality of dismemberment. It's thrills and humanity in the same staggering heartbeat. Dying Light reaches for the stars and clutches a fistful of stardust. It has reached its goal of AAA stardom, but not its preferred state. Not this time. That doesn't stop it from being the most enjoyable parkour sim on the market and a fun playground to run through. In these chaotic times, perhaps the distraction of an outbreak is exactly what you need. Thanks for watching. This has been one hell of an analysis to work on. It's a chunky boy. I hope it does Dying Light the justice that it deserves. These videos are an open conversation. Head down to the comments and tell me what you liked about Dying Light. There are no wrong answers. Has real-world experience affected your enjoyment of a game? Chances are it has. Look me up on Twitter if you want updates on my work. Link is in the description. I pin comments weekly about the progress of my current project. I also advertise my Let's Play channel, Blondie, on the same account, so don't be shy if that interests you too. Head over and check it out. There's a link in the description for Blondie too. If you enjoyed this video, the kindest thing you can do is fan the like button like a 6-shooter, pew pew pew, and share it with others. Small creators like me get discovered when people like you talk about me in other places, and I greatly appreciate your support. All this talk of parkour has left an itch to scratch. Might be time to lace up the shoes again. Good night, and good luck.